Hello, Viscount Strophanthus. As you know, this is one of those videos that is in response to yours. I believe yours was to be called a rant about chaos and destruction in your video response to Rosie. Yes. I've been watching it and I don't really know what's going on between Rosie and Ziggy, but I can only hope that the issue is being solved ASAP before anything wicked's going to happen or unnecessary conflicts. I don't really want that. However, what I really wanted to discuss, not really as in disagreement, but more like in adding my view, because I'm not really much of a person who wants to disagree with people, more like searching for that what I can agree with, or maybe be helpful and add some valuable experiences and information, because that might add something really to the aspect of this topic about purity and impurity and how we perceive those things through the systems that have been created by man, because we only know how to understand what is pure and what is impure if we have defined it for ourselves by a system or within a system, because without any such system, why would the word be of any value, if you ask me? And I have been watching the video, and what concerns me is the topic about chaos and violence. You see, quite currently, what I do not really understand about chaos and violence is that people see it as a negative aspect, something that should not exist. And in my kind of way of looking at it, as I try to understand why it exists, is because there is always chaos and violence. There always has been, always will, and it will never end unless both parties stop to exist, cease to exist. I may not be entirely correct on what I'm about to say, but at least I'm trying to make my attempt on getting onto the understanding of the subject, more like adding my views to them. And I think that chaos and violence exist because the other side, there is plenty of it, and there is a lack, as I call it, a lack of violence and chaos because the other side is filled with it. Because there is a lack of maggots means that there is plenty of other things that grow and do not rot and die. I think that if we are to compare it with something systematic, something like you've got white dots and black dots, like a chess game, there's duality between those sides, and they resolve because they remove each other, so they can make place and room for something new. In my opinion, that would be how it works, because it sounds very logic. It almost works like water and religion. Now, religion is not really one of my favorite subjects, obviously. But wherever there is a lack of water on the planet, that means there's plenty of it somewhere else. Same goes for religion, as in believing in something. Where there's a lack of it on the other side of the planet, there's plenty of it, because apparently there's the desire to have religion. There is a need to have plenty of water, because if the entire planet would exist only out of water, where would the creatures on land be? There would only be sea creatures, no. And speaking of a human's desire, who are we to deny their desires from being granted, from becoming reality? That is something that Theo Maassen has always said in one of his shows. Whatever kind of desires man or one creature has, who are we or who are they to decide that such a desire is not allowed to exist? Excising that. Why? So that your desires are better than the other? I don't think so. I really don't think so. If I want to justify my desires, I shall have to tolerate and accept that everyone has desires. Otherwise, why would I grant myself more rights than other people? That would be very unfair in my opinion. But that's just an opinion. Freedom of speech. It's not really much. Oh, and so to speak of the subject of failing and succeeding and how much value we add to most likely succeeding rather than adding value to failing, I've come to the conclusion that I add a lot more value to the failures I make in life rather than to the successes I have. I'm not really much of a compliment receiving person, because I deny compliments somewhat, and for some dark mystic reason. But I add a lot more value to failing and falling in life, because I learn the lesson out of it so that I don't have to repeat every mistake over and over again, because there's so much value to add to lessons in life than to constantly succeed and learning nothing about it. I mean, if I would constantly succeed, in the end I will wonder what would happen if I for one time make a failure. How would I respond to that? Am I prepared for the first failure if I'm only used to succeeding in life? If I would only add a value to succeeding, if I only score high grades, how would I feel if I for one time get a low score for something? If I add more value to being successful and never failing, I would only strive for perfection, which in my opinion is never there, because once I think I have reached success and perfection, what would we do then? I would be bored to death, in my opinion, because I'm constantly enjoying myself from making mistakes once in a while, learning, falling so that I can rise again, get up and move on. I add a lot more value to that, because that is what has made me for what I am now, and I don't see a reason to go back, because I don't have to do it all over again. And even if it was constant success, I wouldn't have a reason to redo it also, because success doesn't make me really happy. It can make me very unhappy. There really isn't any pursuit of happiness, because even in dark times, when I make a lot of mistakes or failing while learning in the process, I am very happy that I'm allowed to fall and rise up again so that I can move on. That's what makes me much more of a human being than when I'm just a freaking robot who's only designed and programmed for succeeding and making no mistakes whatsoever. I see no reason to be a person like that. Because what would happen if I make, for one time, a mistake, and my program has no definitions on what to do when I make a mistake, because I'm not prepared. And I'd rather be prepared because I have a package of experience that mentions a lot of mistakes. I am much more prepared to prevent any mistakes that are similar to what I've been through. Whatsoever, yeah. So I'm not really ranting, am I? Yeah, I'd rather talk about fun things, but this just kind of got in the way and I felt like responding, so yeah, this is my addition to yours. I'm not disagreeing with anything. Oh, and speaking of purity and impurity, I see, or let me just put it this way. When someone talks about purity, it almost sounds like returning something or someone to the original state. Whether it is in mind or body, it doesn't really matter. But making something pure is only literally done if it is returning back to the original state as it once began. It almost sounds like going back to square one so that you can restart, but that's not entirely true.